The SkySpecs develops automation software for enterprise drone use. When we started the company back in 2012, we were developing drone hardware. But around 2013, 2014, drones became very prevalent. So we kind of had to scrap all of this work that we had been doing and focus on what we were best at, which was the software aspect. Our bread and butter has always been automation. So with our software, we send out drones to actually do inspections of big structures like wind turbines. The way in which you actually inspect those blades until now has been to have a person on the ground looking up there with a telescope, or having a person actually climb the entire tower and then rappel down the blades with a rope. You can collect all of the pictures that it would have taken you 2 to 6 hours. You can now collect in under 20 minutes. Ultimately leads to a much more repeatable process, a much safer process, and a more cost-effective one for these companies that have large fleets of wind turbines.
I believe we're actually in a seismic shift in how technology is used and where technology is used today. When you put electronics into more and more things in more and more places, you start pushing the boundaries of what's possible with the state of the art. Alcentis is a sensor company that specializes in human-machine interface through touch technology. We see touch technology going everywhere. We're no longer bound to flat surfaces and just glass and plastic. So why not foam, fabrics, leathers, fiberglass? Why not curved or textured or pliable surfaces? We're a technology that allows people to interface with the built environment digitally, bridging the digital and physical worlds. There's always plenty of opportunities out there, and we have to be really good at finding the opportunities that create the best returns.
The internet is a super powerful tool, and it's no longer a luxury, it's a necessity. Right now there's 64 million Americans that don't have constant data access. And a lot of it is because they're just priced out. So Lunar is a smartphone company. We make pay-as-you-go smartphones with no monthly bills. So you add credit to your account, you can add as much as you want, as little as $1, and you only pay when you use apps. If you live in Detroit and you order a phone from us, we actually, in partnership with Ford, we built a mobile phone store, so it's a van. When we call it the Lunar Rover, and our customer service team and customer success team actually delivers it to you and helps you set up. So we want to be the people that connect everyone in the world to the internet. I think our technology is going to do it because we let the customer have full control over what they're doing. And I think that's really important.
Please welcome our panelists, Tom Brady, co-founder and Chief Technology Officer, SkySpecs; Justin Teet, Chief Executive Officer, Alcentis; Rohit Van Arsi, co-founder and Chief Technology Officer, Lunar Labs; and our moderator, Joseph Anderson Jr., Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, TAG Holdings.
Good morning. I'm Joe Anderson, and I want to thank you all for joining us today and giving this panel an opportunity to have a mic on. Patrick wasn't the only one. Testing. Testing, testing. You got it now? Okay. Again, I want to thank you all for being here, and I'd like to thank in advance our panel members, Tom, Justin, and Rohit. Each of you have a great story.
No. You gotta turn it on.
You guys are technology guys, aren't you?
Not using ours yet.
Am I okay now? Can you hear me? Oh. How about this? We're working on it.
Is it on, Rohit?
Testing, testing, testing.
No.
I'm on.
Check to see if yours is on. Rohit?
Mine's not on.
Check.
Yeah, we're good.
All right, three of you.
We could sit
Testing,
cheek to cheek if
testing.
we need to.
Am I
Maybe
on?
we should just sit really close together, Joe.
I'm sorry? All right, let me talk a little. All right, now we're there. All right, I want to thank the three of you for joining us. Each of you have a great story, and we're looking forward to hearing more about it. As we saw earlier with the headline when Patrick was up, we are focusing now on using technology to compete in a global economy. And it's very much a part of today and our future tomorrow. And we're here to showcase three Michigan companies that are focused in the technology arena. Technology is definitely changing the way we do business, and we have three companies that will help illustrate that for us. And there are many examples of small and companies and large businesses that work together, but some of the smaller companies have grown into larger companies. For example, Don Foods, Illich Holdings, Meyer, Rush Trucking, Two Men in a Truck, they all started off small and have obviously grown to be very successful. I'm sure you've heard of many of them. And I want to point out that with these three individuals here, it may be their opportunity to start small and grow to be very successful. In my own personal case, I started out in General Motors many years ago and bought my first company, and since then, I guess you would characterize me as a serial entrepreneur with more than 12 acquisitions over time. And as was suggested by Pat, some good, some bad, some ugly. But it's been a good experience, and we grew our businesses to over $800 million in revenue, and the sustainability has continued so that now the management team that I sold them to represents $1.3 billion in revenue. And so the opportunities to grow and be successful are available to all of us. The Business Leaders for Michigan has supported numerous initiatives to help grow Michigan's entrepreneurial community, and we're pleased to showcase these three companies today. First of all, let me start with Tom. Tom, tell us a little bit more about SkySpecs. You've developed aerial vehicles for commercial and industrial use. These are drones that safely reach and inspect tall and otherwise hard-to-reach structures, such as bridges and tall wind turbines. Tell us a little bit more.
Sure thing. Yeah, so SkySpecs is an automated drone company. So we use these drones and target inspection of structures like wind turbines, bridges, like Joe said. The big differentiator for us is obviously automation. So what we have is a push-button system. You put the drone out in front of a wind turbine, you hit one button, drone goes off and collects all of the pictures of each of the four sides of each of the three blades. All of this in under 15 minutes, where these inspections would traditionally take up to 6 hours by actually sending a person up the tower and rappelling down the blades. So huge time savings, huge cost savings, and big for preventative maintenance of wind turbines moving forward.
You've worked in the Ann Arbor community. How has the entrepreneurial environment of Ann Arbor facilitated or helped you in your efforts?
That's a great question, and SkySpecs has, I think, used every single resource available to us that we've been able to find in Ann Arbor. Everything from our very first legal documents for when we did an investment to when we actually formed the LLC that we were previously. All of that we kind of scraped together cash and in-kind offerings from the University of Michigan and other law firms. Another thing about Ann Arbor is that I read a post the other day. Per capita, Ann Arbor has more venture capital available than even Silicon Valley does. So that to me is very surprising. Our CEO Danny, when he goes out for fundraising, you should see the maps of where he spends all of his time. Spends a ton of time in Silicon Valley, spends a little bit of time in Ann Arbor, and what ultimately happens for all of the fundraising rounds that we've brought in, all of it has been within 3 blocks of our office. So it's kind of a funny phenomenon. Ann Arbor's been just a great place for us to be.
I understand your business model has changed. Tell us a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, our business model is a very different beast from what it used to be when we first started. As we kind of alluded to in the video, when SkySpecs was born, we were actually building drone hardware. And this was because back in 2012, there wasn't all of these drones that are commercially available that there are today. And $500,000 and a year later, we finally came to realize that we were spending a lot of time on things that were already commoditized. And at that point, I hate to use the word, we pivoted. We pivoted the business. We started to focus purely on software, and it's allowed us to move exponentially faster. So what used to be a company that was trying to sell drone hardware to enterprise companies that were in inspection businesses, we're now actually an inspection business. We offer an inspection service that's facilitated by our automation software.
You're also helping companies that have the challenge and responsibility of observing and maintaining their equipment use a different approach. Tell us how that works.
Yeah, so when you think about things like industries like wind energy, the thing that's going to tip the balance towards sustainable energy being a viable future for all of our energy needs is maintenance. And so what SkySpecs is a small piece of that puzzle, bringing maintenance to wind turbines and other energy infrastructure, making that exponentially more cost-effective and efficient. So I think we're helping towards that.
Thanks a lot, Tom. Justin, tell us a little bit about Allcentis. You use touch technology in a number of ways. How does it work?
Yeah, so we've been in the touch space for about 30 years collectively, our team. And I don't know if many people know this, but a large part of the history of touch technology actually comes from Michigan. And so we've developed a way to sense touch that allows us to sense through virtually any non-conductive material, through virtually any geometry or texture, and work in every environment from high EMI to water splashes. So it's sort of the next evolution of touch technology for human-machine interface.
Very good. One of our early discussions in preparation for this panel, you talked about small companies working with larger companies. Can you share with some of the representatives of larger companies how they can help?
Yeah, I think we're in an interesting time right now. I think we're, you hear more and more things about either electronics everywhere or Internet of Things, and I think we spend a lot of time, because we're an electric field-based semiconductor company, we spend a lot of time on the West Coast, not just of Michigan. We see this trend of electronics going everywhere, of smart and connected things proliferating, becoming more and more ubiquitous. And I think there's this misconception outside of Michigan, in particular in the Midwest, that people can invent a new technology that means they're going to displace mega companies. I think what we see is a particularly well-suited region to build the things of Internet of Things. So I talk about this being a capital things area and maybe other places being a capital internet area, right? So I think we are in this time right now where we're particularly well-suited for the best builders of the things to partner with emerging technologies to create these small and large business partnerships, allowing companies like ours to get into verticals that would take us maybe years or decades to get into, and allowing very large companies to innovate in ways that release some of the corporate shackles that can come. I actually came up through a small company called AT&T, so I understand the big world too. But this being my fifth startup now, we've been in this space quite a bit, and it's really cool to see more and more large companies really taking a go at partnering with small businesses and trying to help facilitate uptake of new technology.
You mentioned your fifth startup. Can you tell us about the similarities and differences one to another?
Yeah.
The lessons learned.
They all hurt different. So I think the biggest thing that I would note, first, each type of technology is always different. Your story is always different, and you're constantly evolving. But in particular, what we've seen, particularly in Michigan, probably over the last 5 years, is a different appetite for folks like us, right? A culture that's starting to be created around startups that really starts to celebrate risk. And I think the biggest difference you see in Michigan and the Midwest, in places like Silicon Valley, which I've also done work, actually have partners in California, we're starting to see a movement into a more risk-tolerant environment. I think we really start proliferating when we can figure out how to celebrate risk, because it's not always going to be successful. Mm-hmm. But in some places, when you take a risk, you're the jerk. And in other places, you take a risk, and whether you fail or succeed, everybody wants to know what's next. And so building that culture where we have I think it was well said earlier, a tolerance for failure, it's okay to fail, is pretty fundamental in the shifts that we've seen in the last 5 years here in the Midwest.
Very well. Rohit, Lunar Labs, combining selling cell phones with low-cost internet and data usage. Tell us how that works.
Yeah, so our whole idea is to make internet access more affordable and just make it more accessible to everyone. Right now, you're paying way too much for your data plan. You're paying for gigabytes of data, and that's really hard to conceptualize for the normal average human being. No one ever thinks, oh, I'm going to use Facebook for 14 megabytes, right? Everyone thinks, I'm going to go on Facebook for like an hour and then go back to whatever I'm doing. So rather than paying for gigabytes, we allow you to pay per app per day. So you can pay 25 cents, you get access to an app for 24 hours. And the same works for calling and texting. You dial a number, press pay, and then you could talk to mom or whoever you want for the next 24 hours.
You're providing a service to the user, but you're also providing a product. How does the balance between those two work? Which is a higher priority as far as you're concerned?
I think they go hand in hand. We have to do well on both fronts in order for the user to have a great experience.
In our political environment today, we've heard a lot about hacking. Somebody dropped the little birdie that you're a hackathon attendee. What does that mean?
So I think, so hackathons are just 24-hour to 36-hour events where you're building and creating something from start to finish. So it's not the type of hacking you hear about in movies. And
I don't know technology. See there? Go ahead.
Hacking, I think, is just building something and putting something together.
Why did you choose Michigan to launch your company launched Lunar Technology?
So I was a senior in high school about 2 years ago, and we applied to Techstars. We applied to Techstars Detroit, and my co-founder and we ended up getting in, and I had a month left of high school, and that month coincided with the month of Techstars, and we decided to move to Michigan. I dropped out of high school and started the company here, and we sort of fell in love with Detroit, and the community has been great, and everyone's been super helpful, so we decided to stick here.
All right. One of the things that we hear often is the notion of technology being a game changer. Would any of you like to talk about your experience with technology being a game changer in your particular environment? Justin, you laugh first.
Sure,
Go ahead.
yeah. I was hoping you wouldn't point me out. No, I think more than ever in the past maybe 10 or 20 years, we've learned our lesson in this idea of innovation and technology. And you look at guys like BlackBerry or Kodak, and you can see that even large incumbents, if we're not in this to innovate, we're not in this to win long term. And so I think more than ever, not just companies, but entire verticals have largely been siloed. I mean, in the past, if you're really good at building a seat, you build a seat, and if you're really good at building a table, you build a table. Today, you're really seeing the leaders in those spaces drive towards what's user experience look like. So I think it's electronics and technology are here to stay, and I think anybody that's not in the business of trying to innovate is going to have a very, very difficult time staving competition in the next business cycle, 10 years or whatsoever.
Tom, I can reference a little bit technology and its change in that one of my companies does precision machining, and we're machining parts for drone aircraft that are used overseas. I'll leave it at that. Delivering pizzas or the things you do, that's a game changer. Can you say more about how that idea has transitioned?
Yeah, I think two of the factors that are driving the next industrial revolution, so to speak, are robotics and automation, and each of those come with an enormous ecosystem of different types of jobs, different types of manufacturers, and so on. For SkySpecs, it's kind of interesting because we do automation, we do robotics, and what we're ultimately trying to do is we want to be the catalyst that allow our customers to actually move into this era of automation. So, our long-term vision for the future is that data is just constantly available. Data about physical assets in the world just constantly available. You didn't ask it to go be collected. You didn't send a person to go actually collect it. It just so happens that when there was a clear day, a drone took off from a little box and off it went, collected a whole bunch of data about a bridge or a wind turbine or whatever it may be. And I think a lot of companies are still trying to figure out how to harness that automation. We're seeing a ton of things that I find kind of curious. We call them the drone task force. A lot of big companies are starting up these drone task forces. And what it really is a bunch of people that aren't necessarily experts in that particular field, just trying to scrap together a whole bunch of different parts and make drones work for their company. And I think it's just an interesting way to go about it. You wouldn't, if you needed a work truck, you wouldn't build a work truck. You'd go to Ford. You shouldn't be building drones. You shouldn't be trying to develop automation software. Come to companies that are the good at doing it.
Great. If I asked each of you, what's your biggest challenge today? What keeps you up at night? Rohit, can you start?
Making sure our users are happy with our service and product.
Customer satisfaction.
Yes.
Okay. Justin?
Man, we're a pretty highly technical company, and we're taking on some really big guys. So I think you would see with a technology like ours, you have a perception of we're trying to take on the impossible, and so often, like I can imagine when the guys first had an idea of building a Tesla, for example, people probably thought they were crazy. So what keeps us up at night still is being believable quickly. So I was telling somebody earlier that probably the first 3 months of our sales cycle is convincing people we're not crazy. We can actually do what they've spent plenty of time on that was impossible. We can do now, and so. But I think all of these technologies are sort of approaching the same thing, and that's things working the way they should, right? Things working the way they should, and so whether it's automation or robotics, or human-machine interface or controls. It's trying to use technology to make something work better, the way that it should, more human, more beautiful than maybe.
Tom?
I think you might expect that the biggest challenge for SkySpecs is actually developing technology, because what we do is, like Justin said, it's hard. But I think maybe for us the biggest challenge right now is managing customer expectations. Because when we go out and show them a drone that can go inspect a wind turbine in 12 minutes and take all of these 250 pictures, all of them looking beautiful, then their head really starts to spin, and they start imagining, oh my God, what else can I do with this technology? I could deliver a pizza, I could deliver beer, I can do all of these other things. And so we also kind of have to try to keep people stay the course. Let's stay focused. We aren't magicians here. We can't do everything, but here's what we can deliver you in 2 months. So we have to be very careful about getting people's hopes too high or their expectations set too high.
One of our discussion points in preparation for this panel was to talk about something near and dear to my heart as well as yours, a purchase order. And so if you had to say to big company folks like here, how do small companies like yours, technology companies like yours, how do you need to interface with them to get to the point of a purchase order, and more importantly, to get to the payment of the purchase order?
Well, I'd love to answer that.
Go right ahead.
And I'm talking to some of you out here. No, I think we. So I think there's 2 or 3 things that happen in something like this. I was joking on the call with him before this that there's only one thing sexy in startups, and that's a purchase order. And that I say that a little tongue in cheek because I do believe that when we step out into innovation, I mean we're really trying for something that's worthy of attaining. So I say it in jest just a little bit, but I think it's proving out your technology, right? And that's great, and you can prove out your technology, but it's also having customers, big customers, figuring out how to seamlessly and inline adopt your technology, right? And that's not always an easy code to crack. And then the third piece is the closer you get to proving what hasn't been possible, the farther a customer is willing to take it. So we can make touch work in a splash of water or a spill of coffee. We can make it work with gloves. It can be almost perfectly manufacturable and never have field failures. If people say, that's great, can you measure the weight of an onion? And you kind of are like, so figuring out figuring out with new technology how you can, I think one of the guys said it here, stay focused, right? Stay focused in where you can win the best and work with customers to say, hey, let's dream above the funnel, but let's see if there's places in the funnel that we can plug in today to solve problems that we're having fundamentally. Creating more beautiful products, creating more geometries, creating more functionality. So that's it. That's what pushes us to purchase orders quickly.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll tag on to that. I think, and I'm comfortable saying this because I was a huge nerd in high school. I still am by most accounts. The big companies are like the pretty girl right before prom, and Rohith knows this because he was just in high school very recently, it sounds like.
Me too.
Him too. So they're like the pretty girl before prom. The nerd the nerd being the startup here goes to ask them out and hopes to get an answer, but the last thing the nerd wants is to be dragged along. So I think it's very important that for big companies working with startups, two of the most important things to me are decisiveness and transparency. There's a lot of, I think, big companies that want to, keep their pulse on what's going on in the industry, or what technologies are newly available, and so they kind of, bring along little startups in their belt. They do a couple beta projects and this, that, and the other thing, and never really getting to the point where they can commit. So I think a solid no to us is just as important as a purchase order in a lot of cases, because it means startups with limited resources can go spend their time elsewhere. It's so important. So let us go ask someone else to prom. That's what I'm trying to say.
I think to that end too. I actually had a conversation with an executive leader of a big established company just yesterday, and we had the conversation about how you take an emerging technology into an established company, and these companies are designed. I mean, we talk about manufacturability and Six Sigma and all these processes. Well, these processes that are designed to keep us healthy can also act as antibodies to emerging technologies. So I think one of the things that drawing on Tom's point here is providing, this room in particular, providing executive level, I call it air cover, where your folks know it's okay to take risks, and it's okay to adopt new technology, even if that means breaking a process or number of processes to change how you move forward fundamentally. I think that's a big important thing. So I think if you heard a startup have a message today, it would be in order to innovate. The cultural risk has to come from the top down. Otherwise, you're going to hire people like me that either leave or get fired for taking big risks. And I think to create a safe culture to take risks is going to be really important from the top down.
Rohith, I have a question that was not on our planned questions, but as a young man just getting started, how do you get people to take you seriously with your age?
I never let age affect my conversations with anyone, and I try not to hold myself as a 19-year-old. So I think that I just do what I can.
Just go for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
You make the technology work, right?
Yeah.
That's the proof.
I let my work speak for.
There you go.
That's right.
What are, with your young age, what lessons have you learned already? How long have you been at being an entrepreneur?
Well, I've been building stuff my entire life, and I've been super independent ever since I was little. I think the best or the most important lesson I've learned is nothing is ever going to be handed to you. If you want something, you have to go and get it.
Very good. I come back to a point I want to reference in terms of growing, as I spoke earlier. How do you plan for growing your companies? Is that important to an entrepreneur in terms of revenue growth as different than innovation growth? Can you share your perspective on that? Justin, you keep laughing first. I have to keep calling on you.
You're just hitting some nerves here. So I think there's a couple of things, right? Sometimes we start a business to pay for architecture school, right? And But in particular, the closer you get to core embedded technology, the more fundamental it could be. So I think it's, I think this is the million, maybe the $1 billion challenge is how do you create technologies that are ubiquitous? And how do you go capture some portion of the market potential? Not just winning the next purchase order. That's fun to talk about. The earlier you are is to win a purchase order and validate it. But then how do you lead there? And so we faced, I mean, as startup, I mean, just even in the past few days, we've had people counsel us say, hey, go sell your company. You've proved that it could be done. And we are a collective group of innovators that have been innovating now for a long time and have done lots of startups. And my flippant response is, you know what we do if we'd sell the company right now? We'd take our money and we go start a company. But we have some fundamental intellectual property here that we think we can build on, and then we'd have to figure out how to get access to it or start from scratch. So I think figuring out how you commercialize and take advantage of your market opportunity, but never lose sort of track or passion for that longer term roadmap, I think is going to create healthy growth over time. But it's not an easy question.
Tom, anything to add?
Yeah, well, one of my favorite books is Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore, and he talks about this idea of moving via, with product traction and customer traction, moving from the early adopters into your early majority, and that's ultimately where your revenue growth comes from. It's what takes your prototype and your innovation, so to speak, and that's how you harness it and turn it into something that's truly valuable as a company, is actually hitting that ramp. So I think that's exactly how SkySpecs thinks. We're always trying to reach, we're setting our eyes on one milestone at a time, always testing our assumptions, taking one step, taking it as fast as we can, but always one step at a time.
You mentioned yourself being a nerd, and so I would ask the question, in terms of talent, are you looking for fellow nerds? Are you trying to diversify talent? How does it work in an entrepreneurial world like the three of you live in?
I love this question because for SkySpecs, like our secret sauce, I think is and always will be like our amazing team. And I think the thing that we've done the best, what we continue to do the best at is that we hire people that are smarter than us. That is 100% something that we have to do. And maybe the bar is not set too low for me, but there are more people that have been hired, and I think the bar is now continuing to move higher. So that's the number one most important thing, and that's kind of how we've gotten to where we are today.
Ruiz?
Yeah, I think same for us. We always hire people who are much smarter than us. I'm 19. I don't know a lot, and I know that. But so it's important that we hire people that know a lot to make up for what I don't know.
Justin?
Yeah, I think it's not, when we say smart, I think you need to hear from entrepreneurs. We're not just talking about intelligence, right? We're talking about diversity, right? I think we need to look for people that have different perspectives than us, that we could imagine or envision, or doing a job or carrying out a purpose in a different way that we might approach it. I think that's what makes teams really rich. I know for our team in particular, we not only are very, very different people, we have different backgrounds and stuff, but we also have what I would consider a pretty massive appetite for bringing on people that are not just like us, and I think that's how we continue to grow and challenge the norm. My grandfather said to the kid he mentored once, he said, Bud, if we spend any more time together, we're only going to reinforce each other's weaknesses. So I think building a team that doesn't do that is a really important piece.
All right. Thank you all very much, and audience, let's give our panel a great hand.